Good singing with you. Thank you, Doug. The Israelites, after fleeing Egypt, have now left the Sinai Peninsula, and now they're headed toward the Promised Land with God's law on their heart and in their hands. With the tablets, the first one's broken, now the second one's renewed, and here they are on their way, moving right with God, following God as He leads with a pillar of cloud during the day. When it stops, they stop. When it moves, they move. At night, it becomes fire so they can see. Obviously, God's with them, leading them, protecting them, providing for them, but they are not satisfied. Growing more and more discontented. They wonder, they doubt, they complain, and the complaining grows. If you were reading along in the story, it's amazing how many times they complain. And finally, the Lord grows tired of it. He is angered by it. The Lord burns with anger, and the fire from heaven consumes the outside of the camp. The people cry out. Moses prays. The fire dies down, but in time, their complaints do not. They just keep complaining. There surely aren't any complainers here among us in this church, right? I mean, who likes to be around a complainer? Not me. And you would think then, after I said that, I would not be a complainer. Turns out I can be. I like Zig Ziglar's words, be grateful for what you have and stop complaining. It bores everybody else, does no good, and doesn't solve any problem. Be grateful. Don't be a complainer. God doesn't stomach complainers well, but hearing the Lord talk, it appears that it's not so much the complaints, it's the heart. It's a matter of the heart, because the deeper issue is they're showing contempt for God. It's almost like they're spitting in His face. They're becoming faithless. They don't trust God anymore. Obviously they don't. The complaining continues. Even Aaron and Miriam, Moses' own brother and sister, get in on it. A little moment of arrogance, and they receive the consequences of it, but the complaining continues. First it's about water. Right now it's about food, if you're reading along. They have all the manna they need and want, but they're tired of it. They want some meat. Give us meat. They're eating manna every day, and they start longing for the days of Egyptian, slavery, captivity, and oppression. Why? The good old days were better. This bread is becoming wearisome. We've got it in freedom, but slavery was so much sweeter. I mean, there at least we ate fish and cucumbers and melons and onions and garlic, and their mouths were watering just saying the words, but the people found that their complaining ended up in Moses' ear. Moses took it to the Lord, and at first he's like Moses saying, I can't do this. Did I give birth to these people? I can't carry them by myself. The burden's too heavy for me. If you're going to treat me like this, then please go ahead, just kill me. Just kill me. Let's not be too hard on Moses unless you would be willing to lead nearly 1 million, or maybe some have said up to 2 million, maybe more, of ungrateful, cantankerous, rebellious, faithless, flip-flopping folks. Moses had been thinking of what could be done to feed them meat and can't come up with anything, and God just gives him a question. I'm sorry, Moses, is the Lord's hand too short? Is my arm not reaching? Is there something wrong here, Moses? It's a rhetorical question, doesn't need an answer, but it really needs an answer because Moses should know the answer. But the people are wondering about it. It's in their heart and on their lips. They're saying it out loud. In a manner of speaking, can God do this? Can God feed us? Can God take care of us? Can God be trusted? God's about to teach them a lesson and give them what they want and discipline them all at the same time. He says, you want meat? I'll give you meat. And He will give them meat in abundance, so much that it'll make them sick. With the wind that comes in over the waters, it brings the quail, and here are the quail, and they pile up. They're everywhere. As far as you could walk for a day, they're everywhere. They're piled up, and as far as you could see, quail everywhere, so much that they could eat it. And I expect they started to eat it. They started to gather it and collect it and put it together and carve it up and cook it and boil it and roast it and prepare it and eat it. And it must have been incredible. Meat. We finally got meat. It's what they dreamed about. They're stuffing their mouths, choking it down, taking it in till their stomachs are full and it's backing up on them. Pretty soon it's in their mouth and coming out. It's still in their teeth and they're becoming sick. It's not just that they have a stomach issue. God has cursed them with a plague because of their complaining. And did they learn? Would they learn now to be different? You'll find out very quickly. Just keep reading. Because they finally get to Canaan after some had died even there. They're ready to go in. They just have to scout it out first. So Moses gets the exploration team together, asks each tribe, choose one among you who will go in. So 12 undercover spies. The operation lasts 40 days as they go in and search it out. Is the land good or not? Are the people strong or not? Are the cities fortified or not? Is the soil fertile or not? What does it look like? What does it seem like? Give us the report. The fields, the trees, the crops, the fruit. They don't just look at it, they bring some of it back. They want to show the people what it looks like, and that's what the people want. So 40 days later, they come back with a report, not just telling it, but showing it as they bring just a cluster of grapes on a pole between two men. It's huge. The pomegranates, the figs, the grapes, the fruit alone should have told them it's incredible, and it was. A land flowing with milk and honey, it's true. But their faces would have told another story because their words started telling a more discouraging story as they said it. Oh, it's huge. The produce is huge. The walls of the city are huge. The people are huge. Literally huge. The descendants from Anak, the Nephilim, their reputation is correct. They're giants. Yeah, the people are big and the cities are fortified and everybody is stronger than us. The conclusion is, in some ways, two words: we can't. 10 of the 12 rally the people to say the same thing. Everybody seems to be agreeing with them. We can't. Until Caleb breaks in and has a different conclusion. No, please don't say that. We can. While the others were saying they're too big, Caleb's saying God's bigger. They're saying they're frightening, and Caleb's saying God's faithful. But the 10 out of the 12 get the rest of the people so worked up and so afraid, they stay up all night long grumbling and complaining, even crying. Oh, look where we are. Look what is happening. We should have died by now. Why has God brought us out here to die? And their conclusion of all of this, the solution to the problem is this: I know what we should do. We should choose another leader and go back to Egypt. Things are changing among the Israelite community again. Oh, they've always wanted to go back. They keep saying it. They chose another god at Sinai, a golden calf. Worship that one. Now they're ready to pick a new leader who can take them back to Egypt, because slavery in Egypt sounded better than this freedom here. Seems like a slap in the face of Moses and Aaron, but really it's a swipe at God, and he feels it. Moses and Aaron fall on their faces. Joshua and Caleb, the only two spies that have some faith in God enough to hold themselves together and say, we can do it with God. They tear their clothes, try to speak to the people. God will lead us into this good land, they say. He will give it to us, they say. Don't rebel against God, they say. Don't be afraid of the people, they say. We will devour them. They have no protection against us. We have the Lord who is with us. Do not fear, they say. And how do the people respond to that? Kill them. Let's stone them. Wow. God has had enough. How much can he take? He asks Moses, how long will these people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe in me? In spite of all of the miracles. And then he decides what he will do next. Strike them down. Wipe them out. Destroy them all. How about another flood? Maybe not this time with water, since he already promised not to, but how about just take them all out? And I'll start again with Moses, he suggests. I'll start with you, Moses. I mean, he could have. God could have. He has the right. He is God. He can do as he pleases. He considers making Moses into the great nation that he first started to build with Abraham. He could have made a people so much more better, so much more faithful, so much greater than any of these complainers right now who have lost their faith. They never grow tired of complaining to God, but God grows tired of hearing them do it. And now that they're doing more complaining, and it's more than that, it's rebelling, you can ask, what does faithlessness look like? This. There it is, right there. Take a picture. Look at it. They didn't believe what God said. The people of God didn't believe God. They didn't think Moses could lead them. They didn't think they could win the day. They didn't think God was able to deliver them. They just flat didn't believe. It was open rebellion. It was total belief in the words of God. They didn't trust Him. They couldn't trust Him anymore. And if they didn't want God leading them, then God could just step out of the picture or take them out of the picture. They didn't care, and He considers it. Until Moses starts reasoning with God. And by the way, I don't think he gets God to do something that God wasn't already expecting to do. But he does speak of God's reputation and what others might say. And I hope you wrestled with this while you were reading it. Moses reminding God, not that God needed to be reminded, but just how gracious you are and how forgiving you are and how merciful you are, as you said. Slow to anger, abounding in love, forgiving sins and rebellion. And he hopes he will forgive these people as he's always been doing. And what does the Lord say? What does the Lord do? I have forgiven them, as you asked, but none of them will enter the promised land. Grace and punishment wrapped up into one. And so all of those who are right then 20 years old and older will die. The next 40 years they will wander in the desert as each of them falls to the ground and they bury them and move on. For all of those old enough to know better, for all of those who should have had faith, for all of those who saw God deliver them up to this point and still said He can't do it, they would be buried in the wilderness one day until they came back here 40 years later. Joshua and Caleb would be the exceptions to that. And with that, God sends them packing. Go back where you came from. Start wandering. They just had a little ways to go across the river to take the land, but they didn't. They couldn't. They wouldn't. So the land flowing with milk and honey would be in their rearview mirror as they headed out into the deserted lands where nobody would have wanted to live, and they just walked. And they died. They walked and they died. Absolutely sure they would have died had they stepped over the Jordan. Their children would be taken as plunder. But no, it's the other way around. They would die and their children would take the promised land in 40 years because they didn't have enough faith to receive what God had promised. And those children, 19 and younger, those kids of theirs would suffer for the sins of their parents, for their father and mother's rebellion. For 40 years they would wander because of what their parents did, but one day they would. The young ones would walk into that land. 40 years later, 1 year for each day, the spies were exploring the land. They would one day see what their parents could not see because they could not believe God. They couldn't trust Him. What should have taken a few weeks took 40 years. What should have been over in a short time took a generation to obtain. The Israelites, who were carried on eagle's wings by God, were kicking and screaming the whole time. They were delivered to the threshold of Canaan, but threw a fit, fell down and threw a fit, and refused to go in. They saw the miracles of God firsthand all along the way, but when it came to this, they said, no, He can't do it. He's not trustworthy anymore, and because of their faithlessness, their graves would litter the land until their children would occupy Canaan. And even Moses and Aaron were not able to enter the land, if you read that. There's a moment with a rock and some water and a staff, and they can't even do what God tells them to do. They take matters into their own hands, act as if they are in charge, and fail to give God the glory as they should have. So Aaron dies on this mountain, and Moses dies on another mountain. And there on Nebo, Moses gets to go up to the top and he gets to look over into the promised land, but he cannot go in. He cannot go in because even he and Aaron have been faithless near the end. Sad, huh? Kind of a sad way to end. But just like with the people, I'm glad God is gracious to Moses. Even in his disobedience, I'm certain he saves him by his grace. Do you know why? Because he'll see Moses again. We'll see Moses again on another mountain. This time with a prophet named Elijah and Jesus himself. And while you might say, what a thrill to see Moses again, I can guarantee you the thrill was in Moses' heart to see Jesus. And you can say, is there grace found in God as he continues to multiply his grievances and wrath against the people? Absolutely. Is there forgiveness of sins for the most faithless? Yes, thankfully. Is there life after death, even for Moses? Moses could tell you yes. And it is all because of Jesus. The great and overwhelming mercy of God seen in those days in the desert was seen in our day too because of Jesus. We'll see Moses again, and one day we'll see him not just in the presence of Jesus, but all who stand there saved by grace through faith. The once crucified but now risen Lord will someday come back to take his followers home. The question continues to be even to us in our day is, will you be faithful? And I am counting on the grace of God to cover my sins. I am counting on the blood of Jesus to cleanse me and make me righteous. I am counting on the resurrection to unlock my own grave so that someday, even when I die, I will live again. I am counting on the deep and rich mercy of God because if it were not for that, I would have no hope whatsoever. A few things to think about before we close. Number one, the power of intercessory prayer. Did you watch? Did you read? Did you hear Moses standing in the gap for the people? God was ready to wipe them out, and Moses pleaded for them. He asked God to forgive them, for grace to cover them. He sought forgiveness for the same people who wore him out and treated him poorly. Honestly, they deserve to be wiped out. But Moses doesn't want it and God doesn't do it, and I'm grateful for it. But don't you wonder even today how much God will do if his people will just ask? I don't think it's that he has to be persuaded or nudged or pushed into doing something. He just sometimes waits to see what his people will ask for before he acts accordingly. So this morning you may be thinking about somebody who probably doesn't need mercy. You'd rather maybe they don't see mercy. Somebody who frustrates you and makes you mad and turns you upside down and inside out. Would you pray for them? The one who seems like he is far beyond the ability to be saved. For her who is too much for you. Would you pray for them? For the saint who thinks he's good, for the sinner who knows she's not. Would you pray? Pray for mercy. Pray for grace. Pray as if God is listening and is ready to act at your call, because God is listening and ready to act if we would just pray. Also, the power of faith. Fred Craddock tells a story of a kid in his hometown. He said he would believe anything you'd tell him. We'd say, the schoolhouse burned down, no school tomorrow. And he'd say, yay, he believed it. They'd say, they're giving away free watermelons down at town hall. And he'd say, really, free watermelons? He'd run down to get a free watermelon. Hey, the President of the United States is coming to our hometown tomorrow. All right. He said, I remember one time there was an evangelist who came to town and he said to that kid, God loves you and cares for you and comes to us in Jesus Christ. And he said, you know what? The kid believed it. He actually believed it. We might be considered fools to so many in our world today, but we believe it. We are those who believe it. And even when everybody else screams at us, He's not real, we say He is. And some scream out, we can't. And we say, God can. Because He is faithful, and the world may not understand it and will not believe it and may not listen to it. But we're the fools who believe it and speak up like a Caleb who says, I do trust God. And even when you might entertain the thought that you can't, just keep remembering these stories and saying to yourself, but God can. And a lesson we keep coming to in all of this section is the danger of complaining. It's not just what comes out of your mouth, it's a matter of the heart. Whether you see a glass half full or half empty, that's not it. It's can you see God at all? The more complaining, the less trusting. If a person is full of complaints, they can't be full of faith at the same time. So be careful, beware, be grateful. Richard Watley said, it's generally true that all that is required to make men unmindful of what they owe God for any blessing is that they should receive that blessing often and regularly. The Israelites lived that story with stomachs full of free bread. They complained about meat. Learn the lesson, church. Don't repeat the offense. God has been very good to us, continually good to us. Don't become a complainer. Don't become complacent. Be grateful. And then the mercy of God. Watching the Lord discipline His people, punish them, at times wanting to wipe them out. Several times in the Scripture, He moved against them with fire or plagues, leprosy or snakes, and more. And every time, did you read? Every time at some point He stops. Even when He has to punish, His words are right, that He loves to show mercy. He is quick to show grace. He is always abounding in love. And even when we could have been wiped off the face of the earth along with Noah's generation, thankfully we have not been yet. God is still today patient and merciful, loving and kind, loving to forgive and showing it always. The reason He has not wiped out our generation, I am sure, is because He has always been quick to forgive, long-suffering, patient, not wanting any to perish. But still, many will perish. Did you know that? Hell is real, my friends. It may be prepared for the devil and his angels, but too many humans one day will occupy it because of their sinfulness, rebellion, and disobedience. Don't be among them. It will be full of people who think they are good enough but have never sought forgiveness from the Lord. Don't be among them. We didn't get to talk about some of the other stories in these scriptures, the ones you read if you're reading along. The giants who conquered by the faithful, the adulterous couple mixing sex with idolatry and getting a spear through both of them at the same time. The talking donkey who turns out to be smarter than the faithful master riding him. Then the snakes lifted up on a pole so that all who were bitten and would die could live if they would just look at the snake lifted up on the pole. They're all good stories. But the best story of all is still to come, so keep reading. In some ways, that story of the snake being lifted up on the pole in order to bring salvation is very similar to what happens later in the Gospels. And that's not an accident, because it's John who points out the similarity. It's Jesus who fulfills both of those, really. Brings salvation because of the faith of the people who will look on Him. So one day, as Moses put the pole in the ground to look on the snake so all who see it could live, so Jesus one day, as John 3 puts it, would be lifted up so that all who look on Him in faith could be saved. Do you know that story? Do you know that crucified Savior who died for you? And do you believe it? And would you confess it? And have you been immersed because of it? And will you be faithful till the end because of your faith? Let's stand and sing. Come if you need to.
Lord, you are more precious than silver. Lord, you are more costly than gold. Lord, you are more beautiful than diamonds, and nothing I desire compares with you. Lord, you are more precious than silver. Lord, you are more costly than gold. Lord,